first talk today is one I'm super excited for. Slav Borets is the product manager at Render, and he's going to walk us through the Render MCP in some detail. And so any of you who are Render users or interested in how a major compute platform is exposing its capabilities over MCP, I think this talk is going to be fantastic. So Slav, are you ready to get started?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Let's get you going.
Let's get started. Thanks so much for the introduction. Looking forward to sharing more. So at a very high level, let me do a quick intro about myself and share more about kind of how we entered the journey of MCP, and then I'll deep dive into the deck itself. And then I have a short demo at the end. At a very high level, the Render is really, it's obviously a developer tool built by developers for developers. And we were within the month of MCP protocol being out, we already had internal prototype. It took us a couple of iterations in couple internal kind of debates and a beta and then a GA to reach the state of a product where we are now. We're very happy with the outcomes, but we've also have, we went through the entire journey of building a prototype we're not happy with and then redoing it from scratch and then shipping kind of V3 that's finally out of the market today. So happy to share any insights or learnings along the way. And for what it's worth, I'm really excited about Nasim's talk later because observability has been one of the gaps in our product that we're hoping to close soon. Before I begin, I actually wanted to give a quick kind of explain, for those who don't know what Render is, I wanted to offer a quick TLDR about the product. At a very high level, Render is a modern cloud for developers. We offer 4 key things for developers of any size and shapes. Obviously, it's a zero DevOps platform. We automate the complex parts of cloud infra, from servers, networking to security. Our job is to help developers focus entirely on writing code instead of thinking about infrastructure. We offer, to do this, we offer a unified experience and a bunch of key primitives baked in. So from web services to static sites to databases to even to a degree to even in-memory caches, all that is baked in so developers can pick the building blocks they need to fit their product. Everything is obviously Git powered, so fundamentally, if you push code, it's auto deployed across all the instances that you have available. And if your product actually hits product market fit and starts scaling, Render can take care of scaling for you as well. So we have got vertical and horizontal scaling, and we've got plenty of customers who are running giant payloads on Render effectively, and there's still a giant room to grow. Just to set the stage, Render today supports fairly large and breakout companies, and at this point, close to 3 million developers have used the product so far. So when we rolled out our MCP server, we actually rolled it out to collection to all these users, and we're getting fantastic feedback from all of them. So the question here is why create an MCP server, and why we actually we're so excited about the MCP protocol and MCP server. At a high level, it came down to kind of key 3 points. One is we saw within, I think at the point when Sonnet 3.5 launched, we actually saw that LLMs started to get exceptionally good at parsing through large stack traces. So obviously context windows grew, but also reasoning improved. And at that point, at Sonnet 3.5, maybe for that, Sonnet was the key model that actually made it possible. Separately, we also saw agent mode adoption grew across IDEs. Internally as well as externally, we keep hearing customers that they depend on agent mode more and more, and they ask agents within the other cloud code or Cursor to basically write code for them and ask questions. And we wanted to build a tool that supports that loop. And then last but not least, we actually, a key trend that we're seeing today in Render in general across the platform is more developers are entering this space with minimal DevOps experience, and they really need help and guidance on how to how to properly set up their infrastructure and make it work at scale. In general, there's plenty of tutorials available how to make something work on your local machine, but there's very little tutorials, or at least they're not very accessible, on how to actually take your local app and host it in production and make it scale it in a way that supports the growth that you're hoping to support. And what we're seeing is many of these developers, overly relying on LLMs and MCP servers to get their job done. And MCP servers has been the kind of one of the key platforms and key tools in our arsenal to enable these individuals to succeed in scaling their products, to to thousands, if not millions of users. When we took on the responsibility of building MCP server, our goal was to drastically shortcut the time they've spent on debugging and remediating their issues without leaving the IDE. So the key goal was to help, basically enable users to be as effective as possible within the core server. IDE or Cloud Code, many of these tools are used in tandem or separately. And our goal was to basically make developers not even being able to detect and remediate the problem within their IDE as quickly as possible without entering kind of even render UI. And specifically, we focused on core 4 concrete use cases that we wanted to nail, that we saw developers either struggle today or were not necessarily happy with the outcomes. One was troubleshooting. This is the most painful one. It's a fairly common problem for many beginners, but also for seasoned developers to actually have a hard time debugging and figuring out the root cause of 500 errors or sudden spike, why my builds break and why service errors are coming up, and troubleshooting this and fundamentally root causing this to the exact point where the error started to happen and why it's usually time consuming and requires 10, 20, maybe sometimes hours of time. LLMs are exceptionally good at this. Separately, many cases, when you need to launch a new service, it takes you 3 or 5 different deploys and iterations to actually make this work. We believe MCP servers can enable you to kind of deploy a new piece of infrastructure in minutes, if not seconds, given it can just quickly loop through configs and make it work without you actually require manually interfering at all. Separately, database operations. Many devs build databases and depend on databases quite a bit, as you can imagine. LLMs are exceptionally good at writing queries, and we also believe that they're with the right context and the right tools, they can also start querying the database and give the right insights to developers. And last but not least, but in many cases, as you start scale, you start running into performance degradations and performance issues. And again, we saw that this is a key area of toil of developers, and LLMs are really good at trying to evaluate the state of affairs with the right metadata. And MCP servers was a key tool that we thought could provide the right context to the agent about the service state and help them identify and root cause performance issues across the platform. And as a result, what we actually end up shipping is we bundled basically 22 tools that cover majority of the use cases. I'll cover them in a demo as well. I'll show you exactly what we've shipped. We've initially launched a local version of the MCP server and then moved to remote. That's now preferred way of using the product. And we build it through many iterations. We actually build it with safety and security in mind. What that means at a high level is we've actually specifically either prompted or explicitly removed ability for MCP for agents to do destructive actions. So you can create, but you cannot delete or write into databases. This is a kind of a critical feedback we've gotten from customers, and we suspect this is a thing that many developers want today. And for those MCP servers that have not adopted this, they should, because this is one of the key points of feedback we've been getting. Kind of as an outcome, so far thousands of developers have used the MCP server. We're seeing tremendous adoption of this of the MCP server itself. We're top 10% of our customers making more than 300 tool calls per week. Some of them making a couple thousand. Developers are really dependent on this piece of functionality to effectively debug and scale their product. And based on the feedback directly, we've seen that the developers have cut down their ability to spin up new services and to debug issues from hours to minutes. This has been a tremendous productivity gain for many of our customers, and it's something that we're really proud of and we really want to advocate and promote. So with that, I actually wanted to do a quick demo and showcase exactly what we've built and put kind of all these things in context of real code and real use cases. Amazing. So first, let me actually explain what we've, before I jump into code, I actually want to explain what we've done. So at a very high level, I've deployed 3 services on render. One is essentially a front end, a backend, and a database. The backend itself has purposely, the backend itself is just an API. that has a couple of endpoints, but it's all these endpoints are purposely built to showcase kind of broken experiences. One has a memory leak, the other one is very intense on their CPU, one is just slow to respond, the other one's error prone, and the other one just calls for users from database. The job here is to actually showcase how effective MCP service can be at debugging issues and quickly remediating and pushing changes. Separately, I've got a couple of short front end just to kind of test these endpoints, but the test itself will be running against the backend. Amazing. Okay, cool. So let me switch to a cursor and explain what we've done and talk about the kind of the setup here. A quick thing. I'm gonna take over. I'm gonna share a different screen. Give me 1 sec. So this is basically cursor. We've got random MCP loaded in, and it has currently 22 tools. So you can see basically tools we've loaded have plenty of description and all the things kind of explained. You can create services, you can deploy it. There's plenty of ways to interact with the product without necessarily leaving the IDE. And I'll show a couple examples really fast. So as I mentioned, a lot of the backend that was deployed has some issues. And let me just quickly show a demo of potentially trying kind of using the IDE itself or the agent mode to actually identify and debug these problems first. So a classic example is I have a slow query. I don't it'd be nice if I could quickly identify exactly which endpoints are slow and find a way to remediate it. So I can just prompt an agent to do this really fast. Find the slowest endpoints in my MCP demo service and suggest remediation. And agents are really good at figuring out, reading through the MCP server, basically provided context and immediately starting to pull the right tools to make the experience work. So first, it's basically listing all services, and then it finds the exact thing, and then it starts running the right calls to pull metrics and figure out exactly which endpoints are slow. Here we go. And then it immediately has the context for the tool, for the code itself. So it can quickly pinpoint not only the source of the data, but exactly with the code that it was used to generate the data. So it's pretty effective at matching the service metadata with actual code that root caused the problem. So you can actually see it really fast here. So it actually, identify that there's a CPU intensive endpoint that's purposely slow that actually has really high response times. Pinpointed the exact issue. We have a blocking recursive Fibonacci calculation here. And then it immediately started to suggest remediation for the problem. But as you can see, this is this is something that took me a second. But in reality, if I didn't have this tool, it would have taken quite some time. Obviously, this problem was overly simplistic, but the fact that it was able to exactly go through the list of issues, figure out the exact root cause for all of them, and quickly give me a solution is a huge time saver for many engineers. Separately, we can actually, this is an example of a really simple, basically, problem and the root cause. Something that's more advanced that I wanted to switch to that many developers use, and I wanted to showcase an example of, is actually trying to, in many cases, as you try to scale, you quickly run into an issue with costs. Your CPU, memory, and bandwidth start to creep up, and in many cases, developers really need tools to effectively predict and analyze their bandwidth and kind of CPU use and memory usage. So this is something I pre-built earlier today. I've actually just prompted Cloud Code with MCP, with the MCP plugin baked in, to generate a graph of responses that display bandwidth for a particular metadata service, and analyze basically and predict how much bandwidth I'll be consuming based on current trends. This is a fundamentally hard thing to do and requires a lot of manual work, but within seconds, it built its own. It pulled the data, built a Python script to run this, and it ran the script effectively, and then outputted a full graph of the data. And as you can see, this is actually a very useful way to interact with the product as well. So not only did it help me figure out the kind of what was the peak usage and the use over time, but help build a model for how much bandwidth I'll be consuming for the rest of October, which is something that many developers don't think about. But this is a key, in many cases, surprises when it comes to billing and costs come from bandwidth and unnecessary and spikes in outbound, inbound traffic. And this is one way to prevent this and monitor this. The other example that I thought of is moving on. The other example is, in many cases, interaction with databases is fairly toilsome and complicated process. We can relatively quickly do this as well. So you can actually prompt, given we have tools for databases, you can actually prompt the agent to say, like, hey, show me all the users in the and it should just pull this up really fast. This is a quick way for you to kind of, without writing custom queries and running them, you can actually do this yourself, ask these organic, language, like natural language queries, and work with your database and pull direct metadata out for your development needs. Yeah, it's pulling the right Postgres instance, and it's able to, it's going to pull up a list of users now. There you go, really fast. So yeah, at a very high level, I showed a couple examples. One is just debugging inefficiencies and issues with your product. If something breaks, you can quickly identify and debug it. Separately, you can actually build really complicated, you can actually use MCP server to empower your local cloud code and agents to write scripts for you and embed that metadata to the right custom analytics and tools. And last but not least, you can actually use MCP server to interact with databases. This is obviously a really simplistic example with databases, but you can see, you can take this even further and make this a superior tool in your development tool stack.
Very cool. Slav, thank you so much for diving into that in some depth. I had a couple of questions I'd love to understand. So you said since this has been out, you've seen a lot of adoption.
Yeah.
Where are have you had any, I'm curious, like, how early do you see most people start with this? Is it often people that are new to render and they're sort of like, I really want to be like, ask Claude to deploy my app to render, and I pull in the MCP server and sign up for an account and get my key, and that's sort of the beginning of their journey? Have you found any of that, or is it mostly people who are already advanced render users and now want to automate sort of some of the management they've been doing with it?
I think it's definitely so. It's definitely bulk of the customers are earlier in their development journey. And they're basically what's happening is LLMs, the trend we're seeing in general across render or any other past platforms is we're seeing the growth in two spaces. One is number of developers who are just entering the space is growing exponentially. LLMs made any tech curious individual basically almost a junior developer and empowering them to ship their own code. But they frequently lack the DevOps skills necessary to make it scale and work make it scale in the cloud. And they're relying on modern MCP servers and other products to kind of shortcut that gap. And then separately, we're also seeing many developers, and we're seeing our larger customers depending on MCP servers for custom analysis and for example, the example I showed of bandwidth and CPU and memory utilization, all these things are something that if you're a large customer and you're spending a lot of money on the product, you will write the scripts manually. And this is the way for you to really find a way to predict your costs, to manage your costs, to optimize the platform to fit your need without feeling you're, just spending money without that shouldn't be spent.
Yeah, I mean, right now, do you feel like having an MCP server for a PaaS platform is a must-have, like to be competitive? I think Railway has one. I know AWS has one. I'm pretty sure some of the others have them as well. I think 𝗥𝗲𝘱 has one. So are you finding that this is like you can't compete in the market without an MCP server now at this point if you're a hosting platform?
I think it's hard to say. I think what we're seeing is two things. One is people who know about the problem with MCP servers. It hasn't reached mass adoption in terms of not everyone knows about the existence of MCP servers, but those who do find a ton of value. So what we're seeing is every month more and more people organically discover MCP servers, and we're seeing the Google basically results going up. So more and more users are realizing the MCP service is the gate for them to actually ship their stuff to production and effectively scale. And as that knowledge spreads, the adoption spreads. But I don't actually see a way for modern PaaS providers to effectively support, it's effectively newcoming engineers or engineers who are not formally, trained by in engineering to effectively scale and build on their platform. MCP server is a key gateway to making that happen. If you don't have it, you simply will stagnate and won't be able to grow effectively.
Well, it's interesting because if you think about what Vercel has now with 𝘂0, right, they've taken a slightly different approach, which is almost to build their own coding agent into the site. So 𝘂0 is like, don't worry about an MCP server. We want to target people even further down the spectrum of knowledge of how to do things, right? Like they're saying, just come and chat, and we'll build your app literally for you, and then you can push it to Git from here, as opposed to building it in your code platform and then pushing it to our platform. So have you guys thought about, you must have had some conversations about this internally. I'm curious if you see that 𝘂0 approach as being, not as exciting as the MCP approach, or vice versa, or do you feel like you need to do both, honestly?
So I think this is a philosophically interesting question. So I think in general, just to say, 𝘂0 has done an exceptionally great job at building essentially a world-class vibe coding platform on par with Lovable and Replit. We used Lovable internally. We use 𝘂0. We use all these products to kind of prototype. But what we're seeing is the kind of vibe coding, the 𝘂0s and Lovables, they're targeting a slightly different audience than what Render attracts. So these the engineers or the individuals who are using these products are not engineers by trade, and they purposely want to avoid being technical, and they just want to ship a product via simple queries. What we're seeing is also, in many cases, these products, or what we're seeing is many users starting off with Lovable and 𝘂0s, and then quickly realizing they want to have more control over the code base. They want to ship more complicated features that these platforms simply don't enable them to do. You want to be able to build more complicated experiences that's really hard to just prompt your way in. And in order to do that, they're quickly realizing they need to escape that, write the code, and push it, enter cursor and start shipping it in a platform that enables them to own the experience end to end. And this is the market so effectively, this is the market that we're serving now with MCP server, are the individuals who want to have full control of their experience. They want to own the code, and they want to be able to basically avoid just depending on prompts alone to build and support their customers.
It's very interesting because I do feel like both of those are valid, right? Like I'm someone who's more likely to probably use 𝘂0 because I'm not a developer. I struggle sometimes to get from my coding assistant to the computing platform. But I've also gone back and forth. Quite honestly, sometimes I don't bother going to 𝘂0, and I just push directly to Fly or Render. So I sort of feel like it's compressing into almost anybody's, even someone who's not a developer like me, being able to do both. What I would really, the kind of real question, the elephant in the room a bit, is if these AI agents can deploy to any platform via MCP, doesn't this kind of commoditize the whole advantage of Render? I mean, the whole point of Render was it was like, and better than AWS because it gives you a simpler onboarding path. But if all that work is being done by the model, does it kind of hurt Render's moat? Does it hurt Render's differentiation? I mean, I'm assuming you must be having these conversations internally. What are you guys thinking?
It's a fair question. It's a fair question. But we're actually seeing the opposite. What we're seeing is the customers themselves. What we're seeing is V0s and vibe coding is helping customers build simple products and like get their immediate need of like, I need the page to do this. I need a simple app to do X, Y, and Z. However, we're also seeing is like the amount of complicated products being created now has never been higher. What happened is small teams using LLMs are now empowered to ship like applications that are rivaling giant incumbents in the space. And the complexity of the products that small teams are shipping is actually exponentially increasing as well due to the LLMs. And while V0s and Replets today are effectively supporting the simplistic use cases, Render is meant to help you build really complicated product and scale that without necessarily overhead of infrastructure. So I don't know if I'm making kind of the point clear, but we're actually seeing growth in two areas. One is these like individuals who just want to ship something simple, and then number of people who just now want to take on basically Salesforces of the world with a team of 5. Yeah. They are also they're today using Render to do that, and we want to serve that market really, really well.
That all makes a lot of sense to me, and I think I completely agree that LLMs are going to make this development cycle. I think what makes is the sort of elephant in the room, though, is just this question of how are you going to differentiate as an infrastructure provider in a world where the models know how to use any infrastructure provider? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm going to tell my model, hey, my bill is getting really high. Can you lower my bill? What's Google offer? What is Amazon? What is Azure? What is DigitalOcean? What, like, you can, like, you're my DevOps engineer now. You figure it out for me. Just keep my bill low. I don't really care where I'm at, because I don't even know the features that differentiate these platforms. They're completely invisible to me. And that's the part that, as a long time, coming from a background in a lot of infrastructure as a service and hosting and stuff, I worry that we're really almost, like the DevOps person's familiarity with, I mean, AWS is complicated as hell. Render is really easy. And it's much like, if I'm trying to do DevOps, it's way better for me to use Render or Vercel or Fly or Railway because they're easy. If I don't have to do the DevOps, then I don't really care, right? Like you put it wherever you want. So how's that sort of land? That's the part that I keep kind of coming back around to, with how fast we're moving towards zero DevOps.
Yeah, I don't like. It's really hard for me to tell you when it's going to be zero DevOps. I'm sure it's coming at some point in the next century or so, but we're not there today. Like, I think realistically, we're simply not there today. Models are great at writing code and at supporting your immediate needs, but they're not great at managing infra. There's too much complexity involved, costs, human factors, security, all these things that you simply will not outsource to a model just to do that today. You want to be able to have a trusted partner that can actually effectively guarantee certain things, like security is my networking setups, being able to tie two services together, being able to scale them effectively. All these things are still, if you just go to, they're still on a config layer that cannot be just offloaded to LLM to manage. And there's certain know-how and skill that involves there. And we're hoping to close this gap, put Render kind of wrapper on top. But I can imagine in 5 to 10 years, 100%, LLMs will become substantially better, reasoning will improve, and the question there is, what's going to be the competitive angle that Render can offer? To be clear, I think to a degree, we predict 2 things will be true. 1, the complexity of the products will evolve, and the infra required to match the complexity will also continuously increase. We're seeing already this today. So developers are moving more jobs to the background operations. Developers are really using a lot more databases and types of different databases in their stacks. The tooling itself that the modern tech teams depend on to build their products is actually also growing in complexity. And we suspect as long as that complexity grows, Render will be able to have a competitive advantage in serving that complexity or obscuring that complexity away from developer mindshare.
Well, you guys have done a great job so far. And so, I mean, if anyone can bet on anybody to be able to keep finding ways to make developers and small teams punch above their weight, I think Render's a great bet to do that. So congratulations, Craig. I sort of dominated the questions here. Did you have anything you wanted to add? I'm super interested in this because I'm using it all the time now, and I'm almost to the point where I want to try something like, hey, cursor, move my deployment from Vercel to Render and see how it does, because I'm not sure it won't fail. I think it might do just fine.
We'll all Vercel anyway, but please try doing this, and also set up a background job. Get yourself a really, get a database while you're at it as well. Use the full stack. You should love it.
No, I mean, blob storage, all of it. It's just happening so fast. I think it's an awesome time. You guys must be seeing some really awesome use cases. So Slav, thank you so much for coming on. We'll certainly would love to have you back to keep talking about this. It's really exciting work you're doing.
Yeah, very
amazing.
cool.
Well, thank you so much for the invite. It's been awesome.